Jaxson Dart's takeover of college football is going to start at SEC Media Days. Get ready.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports. Today, we're diving into why Jaxson Dart is about to be the star of SEC Media Days and the 2024 college football season. Dart's performance and leadership are set to make waves, and I can't wait to break down what all of this means for Ole Miss and the SEC for you in just a second. But first, a huge thank you to our listeners for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe and never miss an episode. And a special hello to the everydayers who make this show what it is. And don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC or Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy provide great perspectives about the SEC, about Ole Miss, about Vandy, and the broader SEC landscape. So be sure to check them out as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use a code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Now let's get into today's show and talk about all things Ole Miss Rebels. And today we are concentrating on Jaxson Dart and what he could do in 2024 and how it all begins today at SEC Media Days. And can you believe that we have gotten here in SEC Media Days today, the ceremonial kickoff of college football season? SEC Media Days is here. And I think Jaxson Dart is going to be a big star of it, because if you look at Jaxson Dart, if you take away the talent, if you take away the leadership, if you take away all of the extra stuff that makes him an excellent player, you still have the fact that he's just absolutely fantastic in the setting. I have no doubt that he's going to go to SEC Media Days and be a very personable star that everybody wants to discuss. And with Ole Miss being the it team, and with Lane Kiffin being there, and him being a storyline and a fire and a lightning rod that he is, you can see that Ole Miss football on SEC Media Days has a chance to take off. But a larger part of that, it's not necessarily Lane Kiffin from where I sit now. It is going to be Jaxson Dart. And let's just break down over the next 10, 15 minutes or so exactly why Jaxson Dart is the special player that I say he is. And anybody that's listened to my show over the course of the last 2 years knows that I hold Jaxson Dart in extremely high regard. I think there's just, every time a football play needs to be made and the defense doesn't make an equal or greater play, Jaxson Dart just makes the play. If you go back to the 2022 Ole Miss versus Mississippi State game, that game was played in the wind and the rain. Ole Miss ended up losing that game like 22-20 or something like that. But at the very end of the game, Jaxson Dart got the ball back, down 8 on his own 1-yard line. And he had a chance to do what John Forcade has done, and that is lead Ole Miss down the field for a victory. And Jaxson Dart proceeded to march the team down in the wind, in the rain, all the way down the field for a touchdown. That was the introduction that Ole Miss fans had to Jaxson Dart. It's his clutchness. He is simply the most clutch quarterback that has potentially ever played at Ole Miss. You might like Matt Corral. You might like Eli Manning. You might like Archie Manning. You might like John Darnell, which, by the way, I put John Darnell number 2. But Jaxson Dart is simply the most clutch player in Ole Miss history. You look around the Tulane game a year ago, Ole Miss was struggling offensively after Trey Harris got injured. Ole Miss was struggling offensively to block Tulane's defensive line. They just did work on Ole Miss throughout that whole day. There came down to a 4th down, and not only did Ole Miss get the 4th down, they scored a touchdown on the play and ended up beating Tulane by 20 points or something like that. Against Arkansas, same type deal, to where a play needed to be made. He made the play. Ole Miss won the game. Against Mississippi State a year ago, they weren't very good, but the game was iffy. Jaxson Dart was injured. The Ole Miss offense was injured. And you had a situation to where they were not operating on complete cylinders, so to speak. Jaxson Dart on fourth down was able to hit Jordan Watkins. Ole Miss ended up scoring a touchdown, winning the game by 10 points. Every chance that Jaxson Dart seemingly has to make a play, he makes a play. Everybody's going to talk about the Georgia game a year ago. What happened in the Georgia game? Well, what happened in the Georgia game is Jaxson Dart threw for 300 yards. But Ole Miss was without both of its starting tackles. Trey Harris was not 100% at that point. Caden Prieskorn was not 100% at that point. Jordan Watkins had a broken hand, and Quinshon Judkins was, well, Quinshon Judkins. He was showed out and he did what he had to do, but I have no doubt there was a ton of drama leading up to that. But Jaxson Dart did what he had to do that day. In fact, whenever the game was out of hand, Jaxson Dart still trying to make a play is how he got really injured, to where in Louisiana Monroe and Mississippi State and even the Peach Bowl, he was injured in those games and ended up having to have surgery in the offseason. He is clutch. So every question that has been asked of this kid, every single one, you have to say, well, has he answered it? Yes, he has. The only thing that he has not done in his Ole Miss career, and if he does it, he will go down, as the greatest of all time quarterback at Ole Miss. I have no doubts about that. If he can do this, but he needs a win against Georgia. He needs to beat Georgia. And Georgia is the opportunity this year, because Ole Miss is probably going to be favored at kickoff in 11 of their 12 games. The one that they're not going to be is probably that Georgia game. Georgia has the best roster in all of college football. That is his opportunity to raise his level in a similar way that Archie Manning did when the Mule game in 1969. He has a chance to do that in the fan base. And right now, the fan base is very split on their Mount Rushmores of Ole Miss quarterback. Some would put Jaxson Dart on the list, rightfully so. He had a fantastic year. His leadership, everything's is fantastic. Recency bias, the whole 9 yards. But this season, this will be the one that he completely takes over this fan base. If he does what we think he's going to do, he is going to take over this fan base. Now, the flip side of this is, if Ole Miss goes 9-3 or 8-4, Jaxson Dart's going to take the heat. Lane Kiffin is going to take the heat. The expectations are up here, and they rightfully should be up here. Anything besides playoff is a failure, abject. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. That you can have excuses, you can try and gaslight people, you can do whatever you want to. If Ole Miss does not make the playoffs this year, this season is a failure, and the fans should look at it as a failure, because, like I said, Ole Miss is going to be favored in 11 of the 12 games this season. That would mean that they would have to lose probably 2 games in which they were a favorite in. And in any season, that would be viewed a certain way. But Jaxson Dart, I just genuinely don't think he is going to allow that to happen. Anytime an opponent gets really close to pulling off an upset, he makes a play. He does something. He puts the drive together. His leadership is probably the greatest that Ole Miss football has seen in its 120-something years of football. It's fantastic. I don't think people understand, when making play after play after play, when you're called upon, how big of a deal that is. So coming up on today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast, we keep talking about a name that you're going to hear a lot this season, Jaxson Dart. The Ole Miss quarterback is poised for a breakout year, not just in the SEC, but on the national stage as well. Dart's talent, leadership, and determination are setting the stage for what could be an unforgettable season for him and the Rebels. If you think you've seen what Jaxson Dart is capable of, think again. Stay tuned as we drive into why Dart is the player to watch in 2024 and how this performance would elevate Ole Miss to new heights. You do not want to miss this. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find out exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home some huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's guaranteed fit is only available to U.S. customers. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all of that screaming and shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all of the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And also, there are rumors of a Locked On NFL and a Locked On College Sports live stream that is going to join Locked On Sports Today just in time for football season. And there's still time to join the Grove Collective and help Ole Miss football be elite. You can go to thegrovecollective.com and join today. So we talked in the first segment about how Jaxson Dart is unbelievably clutch. And that is almost a result of what Jaxson Dart is and not necessarily a symptom of what he is. If he is clutch because he is unbelievably talented, because Ole Miss has one of the top wide receiver units in all of the country. He has unbelievable leadership. He has recruited this transfer portal class that is number one in the country to Ole Miss. This is Jaxson Dart's team. This is what makes him him. All of this stuff. Jaxson Dart is going to get most of the credit for this football team. I know this is so weird to think about when a Lane Kiffin coach team is going out there that Jaxson Dart is going to be the person that gets the credit for it. It's just the way this is going to be. And when you look at how talented he is, he made a massive jump from year one to year two. We had Phil Steele on the program last week, and he talked about the jump that Jaxson Dart made from year one to year two. And the greatest unicorn in all of college sports is a Lane Kiffin coach quarterback in year three. We haven't seen that jump. And if that jump from year one to year two is matched from year two to year three, you're looking at a number one pick in the NFL draft type player. That's what's going to happen. I don't know if that is what is going to happen, but that's what that jump would mean. We have had Mike Detillier on the show talking about Jaxson Dart coming back for a year three and having a Jaden Daniels type season. That happened. You have all of these national analysts ready to pile on to basically a super charismatic, a super magnetic personality quarterback that is essentially recruited all of the main pieces on this Ole Miss team, who has unbelievably talent, one of the best wide receiving cores of the in all of college football, and a coach that is known for being an offensive guru. How is that guy not going to just completely break out and take everything by the storm? How is he's going to do it? We proved that every question that has been asked of him, he has answered. We have proved that he is one of the most clutch players in Ole Miss history and probably the most clutch quarterback in Ole Miss history. We talked about his wide receiver unit, his coaches, and all of that stuff. Is that what makes Jaxson Dart? What makes him him? And I think it's his leadership. You take that magnetic personality that he has, okay, to where people just want to follow him. And you go down the road with him and it's like, hey, when it gets tough, we need to listen to that guy. They believe him. They follow him. His leadership at Ole Miss, they could probably write a book about it if we're going to be honest about it. If we want to be real about it, not even prognosticating, if time stopped right now at this moment, you could write a book on Jaxson Dart's leadership. People follow that guy. Even Princely Amonmielen during the spring was asked about it. He's like, he was recruited by Jaxson Dart. And Jaxson Dart was almost annoyingly recruiting this guy. and he acts differently than most quarterbacks at other places. He is a whole team guy. He is a focal point that has been risen up by this Ole Miss football team. His leadership is probably why Ole Miss football is going to be really good this year. Now, they have some talent. I'm not saying they don't have talent. They're going to have talent. But if you look at what they have, Jaxson Dart a year ago, he completed about 65% of his passes, 233 for 358, 3,364 yards, 23 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. If he has another year similar to this year, he is going to be really close at most Ole Miss passing records. If he has a year that was like 3,700 yards, 3,800 yards, 35 touchdowns, and things like that, he's going to have about 90% of quarterback records. And when you take into account the receivers that he is going to have at his disposal this season, look at it. Juice Wells. Everybody talks about Juice Wells. Jaxson Dart's eyes lit up at the Manning Passing Academy talking about Juice Wells. He is a prototypical run-after-catch slot type wide receiver, period. He has been compared to Dez Bryant by PFF. This guy is an elite pass catcher, and he gets forgotten about because he had to have surgery in the spring, and nobody has actually seen him play. Yeah, Mr. Reliable in Jordan Watkins, who with a broken hand for a third of the season last year, 53 catches, 741 yards, 3 touchdowns. Returned punts against Auburn with a broken hand. It hadn't even begun to heal. They put a brace on it, put him back there, knowing that he could catch the ball for him to return punts. And then you look at the tight end position in Caden Prieskorn, and we saw in the Peach Bowl how Jaxson Dart leaned on him with a healthy Caden Prieskorn. I think Caden Prieskorn this year has a chance to be a little bit of a difference maker. We have talked about how Ole Miss is going to have Trey Harris, and Trey Harris is the highest graded receiver in all of college football on single coverage, which means that everybody is going to try and double cover him. We did a whole show based on this. They're going to try and double cover this guy. So Ole Miss is trying to find ways to keep them from being able to double cover this guy. And you do that by bringing in a Juice Wells, by having a Jordan Watkins, by using a Caden Prieskorn, by recruiting somebody like Deion Smith, the transfer out of LSU to Holmes County Community College signed. We're waiting for him to get on campus, but that's the reason you recruit this guy, to take double teams away from Trey Harris. All of this makes your wide receiver room not necessarily elite. Okay, it's a top 5 room, no matter who you talk about in the entire country. Whoever's ranking rooms, Ole Miss is going to be in the top 5. And whenever you have that, and you have a quarterback that has shown the ability to prove from one year to the next, which he has done, and now making the assumption that he makes another jump this year with additional weapons in that wide receiver room, records are going to fall. He is going to be an unbelievably efficient quarterback. He is going to use his charismatic personality to kind of be the dude. He is him. Whenever you hear the kids talking about it, he is him. He has all the tools. He is the equivalent of a 5-tool baseball player. He has everything that you want for a college football quarterback. He is him. He was on the stage with Eli Manning. After it was over, Eli Manning, everybody behind the scenes is like, he was impressed by this kid. And I hate calling him a kid because he's 21 years old, but he is him. And because of that, and because of all of these reasons that I've told you over the last 20 minutes, Jaxson Dart is going to take over college football in 2024. The only reason that you think it might not happen is because you don't like Ole Miss, because he doesn't play for your favorite team. If he played for your favorite team, he would be your favorite player. That is what Ole Miss has with Jaxson Dart. And I think Ole Miss fans need to enjoy this. We are in the ability to see and have a moment similar to what Ole Miss fans went through in 1970 with Archie Manning. That third-year starting quarterback, that Ole Miss fans going into 2003. that's how you get to celebrate this quarterback, and it should be really interesting to see what happens. Anyway, coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Ole Miss podcast, it's not just Jaxson Dart who's making headlines. We'll also be talking about two other key players who are set to join him at SEC Media Days in Trey Harris and Jared Ivey. These two standout athletes are ready to showcase their skills and leadership as they represent Ole Miss on one of the biggest stages in all of college football. Harris's dynamic playmaking abilities, Ivey's dominance on defense, they're crucial for the Rebels' success this year. So stick around as we discuss their impact, their expectations, what their presence at SEC Media Days means for Ole Miss football. Do not miss it. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV on the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows that cover each and every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. Be part of history. Now, really, really interesting stuff, because Jaxson Dart, he is going to be the headliner at SEC Media Days, and honestly, he should be. He honestly should have been at SEC Media Days a year ago, but almost took Quinshawn. Quinshawn did a fairly good job, but Jaxson Dart would have taken the spotlight from that moment. And, you know, this season could be a whole lot different if Jaxson Dart went to SEC Media Days. Not necessarily anything negative or positive, is just the introduction of the world to Jaxson Dart would have happened a year earlier, which means everybody would have known the secret of what Ole Miss had. That's what I'm saying. But Trey Harris and Jared Ivey are going to be at SEC Media Days. And let's talk about Jared Ivey. Jared Ivey has a podcast on the Talk of Champions podcast network. I don't know what the podcast name is. It's the Spirits podcast channel, whatever they call it. He does a pretty good job. He's had Lane Kiffin on his show. He talks to current players, as you figure he would, considering he is a current player. But he does an excellent job, a fantastic job. And he is somebody that is really good at communicating his thoughts and getting it around in a nice bite-sized way that people like me, people like you can understand. In that sense, Jared Ivey is going to absolutely kill SEC Media Days. He is. He's going to be a fantastic representation of Ole Miss. Everything that Lane Kiffin wants, he is going to give it. And because of that, I'm thankful. There's not really a bad interview that is going to SEC Media Days for Ole Miss. Ole Miss has a chance to absolutely dominate this, and they are the most attractive team potentially out of all of them. But Jared Ivey was the defensive MVP of the Peach Bowl. Okay. He balled. He absolutely balled. He was Drew Aller's nightmare, although Drew Aller's not a very good quarterback, and he's kind of the 2025 version of Jamarcus Russell. But Jared Ivey was disrupting in the backfield all day. He played a heck of a game. He was defensive MVP. He is somebody that's a very good player. He was the second best player on the defensive line for Ole Miss a year ago. He is going to be the fourth option on Ole Miss's defensive line when Princely and Monmielen becomes healthy. That should scare the heck out of everybody. You're going to have a defensive lineman that is great playing. The starting four on Ole Miss's defensive line are Princely and Monmielen, Walter Nolan, J.J. Pegues, and Jared Ivey. That really can't be messed with. In fact, Ole Miss's whole defense is built to take advantage of that group. And if Ole Miss can do that and get possessions back for Jaxson Dart, for Trey Harris, this offense, this team might win it all. I mean, these are the margins that we're playing with right now. So we'll see. I love Jared Ivey in that position. Like I said, I would have been a fan of J.J. Pegues as well, just because he's a hometown kid. But Jared Ivey, sitting there, he is going to do nothing but be a star at SEC Media Days today. And it'll be really interesting to see what happens there. Now, the last player that is set to go is Trey Harris. Trey Harris is potentially the best wide receiver in all of college football. We talked about how he was the number one graded PFF player. Sitting there with in single coverage. So, you try to build a roster to remove double coverage from him, because that is going to make him a better player. You see what he did last year. He had 54 catches, 985 yards, 8 touchdowns. That was essentially in 75% of a football season. If he'd have played the full football season, he would have probably finished somewhere in the neighborhood of 65 to 70 catches, 1,200 yards, maybe 8 to 12 touchdowns. Somewhere in there. That's what Trey was cost by missing the time that he missed. He's another guy that's going to ball out during an SEC Media Days environment. Everybody, they're going to be super swaggy. Like Jaxson Dart is big on fashion. He's probably going to influence the other guys. They're going to go over to Dallas and put on a show, essentially. But you have the best wide receiver in all of college football. You have an unbelievably charismatic defensive end who isn't going to be the dominant feature on his unit, but he is going to be a major one. And then you have the best quarterback potentially in all of college football. I think his charisma, I think his leadership, I think his clutchness, I think his talent and the players that are around him are going to make for a situation that Jaxson Dart just can't be ignored at the midpoint of October, to where he's everywhere. Real similar to what Jaden Daniels was a year ago, to everybody was just paying attention. That's what I think Jaxson Dart can do this year. And it all starts at SEC Media Days. That's the start of everything. If you want to dominate college football, the start happens at SEC Media Days. You have roughly 2 weeks until fall camp. Then it all gets started. You're getting ready for Furman on August 31st. I mean, we're less than 50 days until kickoff of that. Should be quite interesting. And we just did a whole podcast about SEC Media Days, and we didn't talk about Lane Kiffin. He's going to be there too. And our condolences go out to Lane Kiffin and his family. He lost his dad, Monty Kiffin, like the architect of the Tampa 2. A quick Monty Kiffin story. Whenever I was the video coordinator at Ole Miss, probably 20 years ago or something like that, we had general off-season stuff where you bring in experts, and Coach Orgeron had a connection through Lane Kiffin to Monty Kiffin and got Monty Kiffin to Oxford for basically a week-long study on defense. Listen, I am not a football coach. I like to play one on TV, but I'm not one. So the understanding that comes from the top level whenever they're doing that stuff, to the people that think they know what they're talking about, to people that want to know what they're talking about, that people don't care, it takes a very special person to be able to communicate to all those groups. Monty Kiffin was sitting here talking about Tampa 2 defense and how to stop the run. And hey, what happens on the inside run? What happens on the outside run? How does the corner react to a two-beater in a Tampa 2 defense? All of those questions, I could easily understand what Ole Miss was going to do to try and stop them, because he was able to communicate that to me. This was a special football coach, and he will be missed. And his legacy is nothing but great. And my thoughts and prayers go out to Lane Kiffin and his entire family through this difficult time. But yeah, my experience meeting Monty Kiffin was a pretty cool one. Anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. We have the most perspective surrounding Ole Miss sports, and it's one of the many reasons why we're the number one Ole Miss podcast out there. And thank you for your support on that. But for your second listen, check out Locked On's new venture, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available in the free Fire TV Channels app. For those of you on YouTube, we will send you there right now. Howdy toddy, everyone.